You're way too old school for this meeting, Chris. Ryan Davidson said it with that smirk he'd perfected since Daddy made him VP last year. The kid was 29, wearing a $400 Supreme hoodie and Golden Goose sneakers that cost more than most people's rent. I'm Christopher Matthews, 49 years old, and I've been the CFO of this company for the past 8 years. Before that, I did my time in the Marines and worked my way up through 3 other firms. But apparently none of that mattered to Golden Boy here. I didn't say anything back, just stood there in my Navy suit, letting the silence stretch until everyone in the room started shifting in their chairs. It was 8:15 on a Tuesday morning, and we were in the boardroom of Davidson and Associates Financial Group here in Chicago. The air smelled like burnt coffee, and the kind of fear that shows up right before a $2.8 billion investor meeting. I've been doing this for 20 years. I survived the dot crash, the 2008 meltdown, and more SEC audits than I care to remember. When the numbers don't add up and the executives start sweating, they call me. I'm the guy who fixes things. But today, according to Ryan, I was just the old guy in the corner. Ryan was pacing around in his designer jeans, checking his phone every 30 seconds, probably looking at his crypto portfolio or whatever influencer he was following this week. He had an MBA from Northwestern that his father basically bought with donations, and he talked about disrupting everything like he'd invented the concept of change. Did you hear me, Chris? He asked, not looking up from his phone. Jennifer Stone is expecting innovation, not some boring PowerPoint about balance sheets. You look like my dad's accountant from the 8S. The 3 junior analysts in the corner suddenly became very interested in their laptops. They knew who I was. They knew I'd pulled this company out of the fire more times than they could count. But they also knew Ryan was Anthony Davidson's son, and in family businesses, blood beats competence every single time. My presentation is fine, Ryan, I said, keeping my voice level. It's something I learned in the Marines. Never let them see you sweat. Never raise your voice. Just stay steady. Jennifer Stone isn't coming here for a dog and pony show. She's coming to decide if she wants to park $2.8 billion of pension fund money in our portfolio. She cares about EBITDA, not your sneakers. Ryan rolled his eyes so hard it probably burned calories. God, you're so literal. This is about energy, Chris. It's about the vibe. Dad said, I'm leading this pitch because we need fresh thinking. You're here for backup. You know, if we need someone to explain the boring stuff. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw what he was. A scared kid playing dress up in a boardroom he had no business being in. And I felt something snap inside me. Not loud like a bone breaking, but quiet. Like a wire finally giving way after holding too much weight for too long. The door opened and Anthony Davidson walked in. Anthony was 58 years old and had been coasting on other people's work for most of his career. He had the kind of 10 that screamed, I spend company time on golf courses, and he clapped his hands together like he was about to announce a surprise party. Gentlemen, he boomed, big day today. Big day. Ryan, you look sharp, very contemporary. Chris, you're here. Good. You bring the binders. I brought the data. Anthony, I said, patting the stack of folders in front of me. The actual numbers, risk assessments, compliance history. Great. Great. He waved me off, pouring himself coffee. Just keep those under the table for now. We don't want to bore Jennifer Stone to death before Ryan works his magic. We're selling the future today, not the past. The past? He was talking about the 16 months I spent rebuilding our balance sheet after Anthony tried to acquire a crypto startup that turned out to be 2 guys in a basement in Estonia. The past was why this company wasn't currently being liquidated by federal regulators. Anthony, I said, keeping my voice steady. Jennifer Stone runs the Vanguard Institutional Fund. She eats vision for breakfast and spits out bankruptcy filings. If we don't lead with fundamentals, she's going to walk. Ryan groaned. Dad, he's doing it again. He's being such a buzzkill. Can you tell him to just let me handle the presentation? Anthony sighed, giving me that look that said, be a team player. Chris, please. Ryan has instincts for this new generation of investors. Just support him, okay? Be part of the team. Team player. The corporate version of shut up and take the hit. I looked at the clock. 8:55. Jennifer Stone would walk through those doors in 5 minutes. I looked at Ryan, adjusting his hoodie like it was a power suit. I looked at Anthony, completely oblivious to the fact that he was about to feed his company into a wood chipper. Understood, I said, and I meant it. I understood perfectly. If they wanted a show, I'd let them have their show. I wouldn't interrupt. I wouldn't save them. I'd sit there in my boring navy suit and watch Ryan crash and burn. The double doors opened at exactly 9h. Jennifer Stone didn't do fashionably late. She walked in and the temperature seemed to drop 10. Jennifer Stone was maybe 5'6", wearing a charcoal suit that fit perfectly, and she had the kind of presence that made you straighten up without realizing it. Behind her came two associates carrying tablets and wearing expressions that said they'd seen companies die in rooms like this. Ms. Stone. Ryan practically bounced out of his chair, extending his hand with all the enthusiasm of a golden retriever. I'm Ryan, so stoked to finally connect. Huge fan of your portfolio's diversity matrix. Stone looked at his hand for a full second before shaking it. Quick, professional done, Mr. Davidson, she said. Her voice was dry, efficient. Your father speaks highly of you. Dad's totally biased. Ryan laughed, running his hand through his hair. But seriously, we are ready to blow your mind today. We're thinking outside the box. You know, paradigm shifts and all that. I took a sip of water to hide my reaction. Paradigm shifts. Sure, kid. Anthony gestured for everyone to sit. Jennifer Ryan has prepared something really special. Captures our forward momentum perfectly. Stone sat down, opened a slim notebook, and uncapped a pen. I have 90 minutes, she said. My team reviewed your one okay. I have specific questions about your debt-to-equity ratio in the emerging market sector and the liquidity of your Class B shares. She looked around the room. Her eyes passed over Anthony, dismissed the nervous analysts, and landed on me. It wasn't flirtation. It was recognition. She saw the military posture, the quiet confidence, the guy who actually knew the numbers. Then Ryan clapped his hands. Totally. We can get into the weeds later. But first, let's talk about the narrative. He dimmed the lights and clicked his remote. The big screen lit up with a slide that just said in some graffiti font, "The market is a conversation," Ryan began, pacing like he was giving a TED talk. "And right now our company is shouting. But are we listening? We're pivoting to a consumer-first, eco-conscious, digital native story." I watched Stone. She hadn't written a single word. She was staring at the slide, with an expression somewhere between boredom and mild nausea. Her younger associate was taking notes, but they looked more like a damage assessment than meeting minutes. "We're launching an influencer campaign," Ryan continued, clicking to show a collage of TikTok stars holding products that looked suspiciously generic. "We call it Project Vibe. We estimate a 400% increase in brand sentiment within Q3. Sentiment isn't a metric," Stone said. She didn't raise her voice, just dropped the words like stones into still water. Ryan froze. His smile faltered for just a second. "Well, I mean brand engagement. Metrics, consumer emotional investment. It translates to revenue streams eventually." "Eventually," Stone repeated, making a note. She looked at Anthony. "You're asking for $2.8 billion. And your opening pitches. Engagement metrics that might translate to revenue eventually." Anthony chuckled nervously, his tan looking suddenly artificial under the fluorescent lights. "Jennifer, it's about capturing market momentum. The youth demographic has incredible spending power and brand loyalty when you connect authentically. The youth market doesn't control pension funds." Stone cut him off, her pen tapping once against her notebook. She turned back to Ryan. "What's your customer acquisition cost for this Project Vibe versus traditional channels?" Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at the screen like the answer might magically appear next to the TikTok teenager's face. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 seconds. He cleared his throat, tugging at his hoodie. "Well, the data is it's fluid because it's organic growth, right? We're not looking at traditional CAC models because we're disrupting the acquisition paradigm itself." The junior analysts in the corner had stopped pretending to take notes. They were just watching the train wreck now, and I could see the exact moment they realized their employment here might not be long-term. "It's not fluid," I said. The room went dead silent. Ryan whipped around to glare at me. Anthony looked like he wanted to throw his coffee mug at my head, but Stone just turned her chair slightly to face me, and for the first time since she'd walked in, I saw genuine interest in her eyes. "It's not fluid," I repeated, keeping my voice flat and professional. "Customer acquisition cost for digital influencer channels is currently averaging $38 per conversion, which is 22% higher than our traditional direct mail strategy. But the lifetime value of those customers is 35% lower because they turn out in 4 months. Stone finally touched her pen to paper. She wrote something down, and I noticed her associate lean forward slightly. suddenly paying much closer attention. Chris, Ryan hissed, his smile now looking more like someone trying to pass a kidney stone. I was getting to those specifics. You don't need to interrupt the creative flow. There was no flow, I thought. There was only a drain, and we were circling it faster by the minute. Go on, Stone said to me, ignoring Ryan completely. Why is the churn rate so high? This was it. The moment that would define the next chapter of my career and possibly my life. I could save Ryan. I could give some vague answer about market volatility or economic uncertainty. That's what a team player would do. That's what the old me might have done. But then I remembered the accountant comment. I remembered Anthony telling me to stay under the table like some kind of corporate furniture. I looked at Ryan's designer sneakers and his Supreme hoodie, and I made my choice. The churn rate is high, I said, locking eyes with Stone. Because we cut our R&D by 12% to fund the influencer marketing. Product quality in the new vertical suffered. Customers buy once, realize it's inferior to competitors, and never come back. Anthony actually gasped, Christopher, that is taken completely out of context. Stone didn't look at Anthony, she just nodded at me. Continue. Ryan looked like he'd been slapped with a wet fish. He stood there in the dim light of his synergy slide, realizing, for the first time, that this wasn't a game, and I wasn't just part of the scenery. I was the one who actually knew how to run this company. Chris, Ryan said, his voice getting higher. You're totally missing the big picture here. We're investing in future growth, not maintaining legacy systems. Legacy systems like quality control, I asked. Because that's what we cut to pay for your TikTok stars. Stone made another note. Her associate was now typing furiously on her tablet. Mr. Matthews, Stone said, what other operational changes were made to fund this marketing initiative? I could feel Anthony's eyes burning into the side of my head, but I kept going. We reduced our customer service staff by 30%, outsourced technical support to a call center in the Philippines, and delayed software security updates by 6 months to meet the marketing budget allocation. Jesus Christ, Chris, Anthony said, his voice barely controlled. You're making us sound like we're running a scam operation. I'm disclosing material operational changes that directly impact customer retention and satisfaction metrics, I said. Which Ms. Stone will discover anyway when she conducts proper due diligence. Stone looked up from her notes and governance structure. I understand your audit committee chair is a family member. Ryan brightened, thinking this was safer territory. Aunt Patricia, yeah, she's amazing. She teaches yoga and mindfulness, but she's super intuitive about financial flows. She really gets the holistic approach to fiscal responsibility. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the VIC system humming in the walls. A yoga instructor, the head of the audit committee for a company seeking $2.8 billion in institutional capital, was a yoga instructor who was intuitive about financial flows. I slowly slid a document across the table. It made a soft sliding sound on the polished mahogany. It was the governance reform proposal I'd written 18 months ago, the one Anthony had buried because it would have meant removing his relatives from the corporate payroll. Miss Stone, I said quietly, if you look at Section 3 in the packet I just provided, you'll see our proposed risk mitigation strategy regarding board composition. The current structure is familial. We've outlined a transition plan to bring in 3 independent directors with relevant financial experience within 90 days. Stone picked up the packet and flipped to Section 3. She read it while Ryan stared at the document like it was radioactive. I didn't approve that document, Ryan said, his voice cracking slightly. Chris, why are you handing out unauthorized materials? This isn't part of the presentation. Because, I said, keeping my eyes on Stone. Ms. Stone asked about governance, and Aunt Patricia teaches yoga isn't an answer that inspires confidence in fiduciary oversight. Anthony's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. Now hold on just a minute. Patricia is very financially astute. She managed her own divorce settlement very successfully. Then you're not compliant with standard institutional investment requirements, Stone said, closing the packet. She looked directly at Anthony. You're asking me to leverage pension funds. If I take this to my investment committee and tell them your audit chair's primary qualification is managing a divorce settlement, they'll recommend shorting your stock instead of buying it. Ryan looked at his father, then back at me, panic starting to creep into his voice. But our innovation culture, our disruption mindset. We have flexible work arrangements and a meditation room. You have an $8 million regulatory exposure, I said, opening my folder to the compliance section. I've outlined the potential SEC fines on page 12. It exceeds your projected Q for profit margin by 180%. Ryan grabbed the packet from my hands and stared at page 12 like he was trying to read ancient hieroglyphics. These are all problems. Why would you show her this? You're actively sabotaging the presentation. I'm disclosing material risk, I said calmly. It's called the law, Ryan. If we don't disclose it and she invests, that's securities fraud. And fraud means federal prison, not minimum security, tennis playing prison. Real prison with orange jumpsuits that definitely don't come from Supreme. Stone actually smiled. A quick, sharp expression that reminded me of a blade flashing in sunlight. He's right. He's saving you from a federal investigation, Mr. Davidson. You should thank him. Ryan's face went through several color changes before settling on a mottled red. The humiliation was complete. He was being educated in corporate law in his own conference room by the outdated accountant he'd mocked an hour earlier. I need a break, Ryan announced, his voice tight and high. I need to check on the catering arrangements. He walked out on his $300 sneakers, leaving behind the wreckage of his presentation and his credibility. Anthony glared at me with undisguised hatred. You just destroyed our biggest opportunity. I prevented you from committing fraud, I replied evenly. Stone watched the door close behind Ryan. Then she turned to me with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Keep talking. Mr. Matthews, tell me about the debt structure. And for the next 45 with Ryan sulking somewhere and Anthony sitting in stunned silence, I did what I was actually paid to do. I ran the meeting. The debt discussion went perfectly, without Ryan there to interrupt with disruptive synergies. I walked Stone through our capital structure, credit ratings, and liquidity ratios. It was like playing chess with a grandmother. Fast, precise, no wasted moves. Stone's questions were surgical. She wanted specifics about our covenant compliance, our revolving credit facilities, and our exposure to variable interest rates. I had answers for everything because I'd lived with these numbers for 8 years. Every monthly report, every quarterly filing, every audit finding, it was all there in my head, organized and ready. Your bridge loan, Stone said, making a note. It's due for renewal in 2 weeks. What's your refinancing strategy? I felt Anthony tense beside me. This was the landmine he'd been hoping we wouldn't step on. We're negotiating terms with City National, I said. The current facility is $15 million at prime plus 200 basis points. Given our improved EBITDA performance over the past 18 months, we're hoping to reduce that to prime plus 150. And if City National declines renewal, Anthony finally spoke up. They won't decline. We've been with them for 12 years. Stone looked at him with the expression of someone who'd seen 12-year banking relationships die overnight. Mr. Davidson, banking relationships are transactional, not sentimental. What's your backup plan? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Anthony had no backup plan because he'd assumed loyalty meant something in modern banking. We have preliminary discussions with 2 other lenders, I said, which was technically true. I'd made some calls last month when I saw our covenant ratios trending downward, but it would likely be at higher rates and potentially require additional collateral. Stone made several more notes. When she finished, she closed her notebook and looked around the room. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. This has been educational. We'll be in touch within 48 hours regarding our investment decision. It was the professional version of don't call us, we'll call you. As Stone gathered her materials, she turned to me. Mr. Matthews, could I have a word privately? Anthony started to object, but Stone's look silenced him. We stepped into the hallway while her associates waited by the elevator. Interesting company you work for, she said. It has potential, I replied diplomatically. Under different leadership, she added. It wasn't a question. That's not my call to make. Stone handed me her business card. It might be soon. That bridge loan. City National called my office yesterday. They're looking to sell the note rather than renew it. They're concerned about management competency. My stomach dropped. If City National sold our note to a vulture fund, we'd be in default within 30 days. However, Stone continued, institutional investors like my fund sometimes acquire distressed debt at attractive prices. Gives us more flexibility in how we structure ongoing relationships. She was offering to buy our debt, which would make her our primary creditor, which would give her significant control over company operations. Think about it. she said, stepping into the elevator. Sometimes the best investment isn't in a company's future. It's in its restructured present. The elevator doors closed, leaving me alone in the hallway with the business card and the weight of what she'd just implied. When I returned to the conference room, Anthony and Ryan were having what sounded like a heated discussion in hushed tones. They stopped when I walked in. "Well," Anthony demanded, "what did she want?" "To clarify some technical details about our debt structure," I said, which was technically accurate. Ryan had recovered some of his arrogance during my absence. "Whatever. She's just old school finance. There are plenty of other investors who get our vision. Dad, we should pivot to crypto-focused funds. They understand disruption." I almost laughed. Ryan thought he could shop around for investors who wouldn't ask difficult questions about things like governance and profitability. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Anthony. "Chris, we need to talk." My office 7 a.m. When I arrived, Anthony looked like he'd aged 5 years since Tuesday. His tan looked shallow under the fluorescent lights, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. "City National declined renewal," he said without preamble. "They want the full $15 million in 2 weeks. I sat down across from him. "What did you tell them?" "That we have other options, but Chris, we don't. I've called every relationship I have. Nobody wants to touch us after that meeting leaked." "Leaked?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "Stone's people have been making calls. Due diligence, they call it. Words getting around about our governance issues, the regulatory exposure, Ryan's presentation performance." I kept my expression neutral, but internally I was impressed. Stone worked fast. "There is one option," Anthony said, sliding a document across his desk. "Stone's fund offered to acquire the City National note at face value. No discount, but there are conditions." I picked up the document. It was a restructuring proposal. Jennifer Stone's fund would acquire our debt, convert part of it to equity, and require immediate governance reforms, including the appointment of an interim CFO to oversee daily operations while management transitioned to advisory roles. The interim CFO position had my name on it. "She wants you, Chris. She wants you running the day-to-day operations while Ryan and I step back." I looked up from the document. "What did you tell her?" Anthony's shoulders sagged. I told her, "Yes, we don't have a choice." 6 months later, I was sitting in Anthony's old office, which was now my office. The nameplate on the door read, "Christopher Matthews, Chief Operating Officer." Ryan had taken a position with a cryptocurrency startup in Austin, where his enthusiasm for disruption was apparently better appreciated. Anthony played golf 3 days a week and attended board meetings where he sat quietly and voted as directed. The governance reforms had gone through smoothly, and Patricia was replaced by 3 actual financial professionals with relevant experience. The influencer marketing budget was redirected to R&D and product improvement. Customer satisfaction scores had improved by 40% in 4 months. Jennifer Stone's fund had ultimately invested $1.8 billion, not the original $2.8 billion, but it was structured as a partnership rather than just an investment. She had a board seat and quarterly operational reviews, but she let me run the company without interference. I kept Anthony's old Newton's cradle on my desk. Sometimes I click it when I'm thinking about decisions and consequences. Each ball that moves sets the next one in motion, creating a chain reaction that continues until the energy dissipates. Ryan was wrong about one thing. I wasn't old school. I was just school. And in the end, competence isn't about age or style. It's about knowing the difference between substance and noise, between vision and delusion, between building something lasting and just making it look good for the cameras. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't dramatic. It's simply being right when it matters.